Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this Wednesday morning. I have one of my favorite humans on the planet, Stephen Beschloff, who somehow we talked into joining us. Um, Before we start, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege to give a shout out to two Vermonters, state where I live now and love, who have just won Olympic medals. Yesterday, a 25-year-old American named Ben Ogden won a silver medal. And in case you're wondering, the last time any American male won any cross-country skiing medal was 1976. And that was a guy named Bill Koch, who actually lives down the street from Ben Ogden, or Ben Ogden lives down the street from Bill Koch. And it was so unexpected in 1976 when the Innsbruck Olympics, they had to delay the ceremony because they didn't know how to play the Star Spangled Banner. So it's been since then, and it's just unbelievable. I'm going to write something about it today for Substack, and really nerd out later on some kind of live about skiing. And then one of the Cochran family, which sort of this amazing Vermont ski heritage, kind of the Kennedys of downhill skiing in Vermont, won a medal in the Super G downhill. So anyway, it's a great day. And Stephen, welcome. Welcome.
Yeah,
man.
well, can I just say, there are a lot of people who can talk about skiing because, every 4 years they tune into the Olympics. You, on the other hand, you actually do ski, and you've done it in all kinds of exotic locations, which I think gives you a kind of an extra pull for being able to share your appreciation for others who do it.
I lost my taste for downhill skiing when I got banned for going out of bounds, and still continue to have a great passion for cross country skiing, which in America is sort of like the race walking of of winter sports.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's for another discussion. So Stephen, the thing that I think we have to just accept is every day, like today is the best version of Donald Trump we're going to have. Tomorrow it'll be worse.
Oh, man.
And the next day it'll be worse.
Yep. The one thing is predictable, it will keep getting worse.
It will just keep getting worse. Yeah. When you go back to 20, when there was this whole anti-Trump movement of sorts, whatever you call it, there was kind of a schism in it. That overstates it, but there was a divide.
Yeah.
There were those who felt that, Trump had hijacked the party and that it was about saving the party. And I would say, with the best of intentions, Bill Kristol was in that. A lot of the, Sarah Longwell, a lot of the early kind of bulwark crowd. And then over at the Trump, over at the Lincoln Project, there's no going back. You have to burn it to the ground. And I think now everybody has pretty much, come to the realization that there is no saving the Republican Party.
Yeah. We're way beyond that. And I honestly, the thing that I've been sort of, rolling around in my head these last days is that, we're still at an early place of understanding the scale of horror of the Epstein files. Not only the acts themselves, but also the range of people, the range of sickness, of a collection of very rich and very powerful people thinking the law doesn't apply to them. And we're seeing that, in these files. There's a limit on how much one can tolerate in the looking at them, because they're so disturbing and sickening in all kinds of ways. But I cannot get around the feeling that this has got to keep growing, that it's just, there's a level beyond which, even the MAGA crowd can't stomach, even those people who are part of the cult, right, who are committed to the charismatic leader, who are willing to go along with all of his manipulations and exploitations and corruptions and violations and, all of it that they're willing to go along with, and, all of the, untethered reality that comes forth from him. There's a limit. And, we did seem to learn that pedophilia child rape was maybe one of those sort of, there's an actual red line that might be one of those. But I think the fact that there's so many people, powerful, rich, powerful people who are in those files, that I just, I don't see how that goes away, and I don't see how that doesn't keep building. I mean, yesterday, Jamie Raskin, who had looked at some of the unredacted files that haven't been released yet, and he said, and I thought he was speaking hyperbolically, he said there that Donald Trump is referenced, over 1 million times, and he clarified that he didn't mean it hyperbolically, that he meant literally over 1 million times. So, they probably should be called the Trump Epstein files, since Trump always wants his name on everything.
I mean, heaven help you if you're the FBI agents assigned to redacting that. That's a lot of whiteout.
Yeah.
1 million times. I mean, like, where do you begin? But look, Stephen, you should remember that this is going to be okay, because the Republican Party is the party of family values.
Yeah. So, and law and order.
And law and order, of course. Yeah.
And commitment to the Constitution, by the way. So we've got it all sort of lined up. So when you say that the Republican Party, it's hard to see how it carries on. How does any of this carry on? There was a piece that I saw of a special agent saying that if all of this comes out, and somebody who had seen a lot of this, the national security implications are enormous.
Yeah.
Well, I don't doubt that.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah. So then the question is, do we say that these things, this whole process, this whole secret world should remain secret because it endangers U.S. security, or frankly, do you say it all needs to be, let's just burn it all down? That's sort of the other end of the spectrum.
Look, I think the damage that's being done on the national security front, it playing out lots of places, but most vividly, horribly, tragically in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Where the United States is helping a dictator invade a European country. I mean, there's really no other way around it. And of all the anger and disgust and loathing I have for these Republicans I helped elect, the fact that they are not doing more here. I mean, I go back to Roger Wicker, because I've known Roger forever. I helped get him elected. Always thought he was, a great guy, and a kind of general, good, decent person. And he's someone whose entire career in public life, if it was dedicated to one thing, it was national security built on alliances abroad. I mean, that was just a touchstone. I mean, that was
alliances. That's a beautiful notion.
Like a Catholic who does actually believe in communion, and all his life he wanted to be chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Now he is, and what did he do? Ushered in Pete Hegseth, and it is a true statement, and I think it will be Roger Wicker's legacy, that more innocent European women and children have been murdered in their homes and on the streets and their schools since Roger Wicker became chairman of the Armed Services Committee than in any like period since 1945. And, the normal, well, he's worried about being primary. Roger just got reelected. I doubt he'll ever run. He'll be 80 when he runs again. He's not, and it's just absolutely horrifying.
I mean, look, we can go back and talk about the number of feckless, spineless Republicans, unprincipled perhaps, but people who decided that their own career ambitions exceed their responsibility to the Constitution and the rule of law. But and maybe there is a meaningful percentage of those who are genuinely afraid for the safety of their family, with death threats and all that, if they dare to cross the guy. And that I find sort of also a shameless failure, because don't go into public life if that's your problem. But what I want to say to you,
I mean, the last public official assassinated that I'm aware of in America was Huey Long, and he was shot because he was sleeping with a woman and her husband shot him. So I think It's always amused
Yeah,
me
well,
when
there were a few
governors.
Democratic lawmakers that were
Well,
murdered
I mean,
in
yeah, no, there
Minnesota.
were. You're right, but I'm talking about someone. Well, John Kennedy, obviously,
Yeah,
but that presidential sort of in a category of itself. There's not a lot of
yeah.
people going out there shooting governors and senators and congressmen.
Yeah, well, I
Uh,
mean, there's some judges. I mean, look, there's a whole climate of violence that he's created. And look, I mean, I think I think at this point, I don't want to be inured to it. I don't want to simply adapt to that, but it has become part of our public life, which is one of the other sort of sins of this whole period.
yeah,
But to get back to your core notion, which I think is a really important one, is, I mean, the idea of 3 more years of this constant onslaught, 3 more years of this guy who's committed to, he's told us he's done the dry run in Georgia to seize ballots, and he's obviously, let's hope that there's a massive turnout that happens of furious people in November, which translates into a massive defeat for the Republicans. But we know that what's going to happen is that he's already shown us he's going to seize ballots. He's going to deny the legitimacy of election after election. They'll have tried to intimidate people with ICE agents or others at polling places. And, I worry about Mike Johnson, that what he's going to do is, now we get to the point where people are actually, elected and they're known and it's clear, he won't seat people.
yeah. I think that's a very real possibility. And look, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. There seems to be a growing conversation from different angles, led by different people, about the necessity and also sort of tied to that, the practicality and what it would be like to have some sort of economic boycott, some sort of strike. Scott Galloway, who's an interesting character if you don't follow Scott Galloway.
Yeah, yeah, he is.
He very interesting guy. And he is calling for a general strike focused on specific targets.
Yeah.
Like one of his big targets is AI, because it's such a huge percentage of the investment now. Like have a national Chat GPT boycott.
Yeah.
Others have talked about it.
I'm not sure you're going to whip up a fury of the American people over AI. I honestly don't see that particularly.
I don't see. But then, people say, okay, with the Jimmy Kimmel thing, that when, people unsubscribed and things like this. But it seems to me where do you begin? I mean,
yeah.
So
well, look, I think we can look back at the Tesla boycotts and the Tesla protests. I thought it was pretty successful in the moment. I mean, I think the world has sort of shifted from then, but you had a combination of people boycotting the product, people, trying to resell their cars. There were so many that they had trouble reselling them because even Tesla didn't want them anymore. You had people that were, going at very specific dealerships surrounding them, protesting and so on. And it had an effect.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it had not only an effect in terms of the brand sort of identity overall, it did lead to declining sales. It did lead to a decline in the stock market. And those things were knowable and visible. And, Trump was sort of threatening that they were going to, arrest and, prosecute and, I don't know, murder people, execute people who were involved in protests, some kind of extremism. They're all obviously domestic terrorists, all of the sort of strategies that they have to, deny legitimate protest in a free society. But the fact is that one targeted thing, I think, is something of a template. And
it probably had a lot to do with Musk getting out of government.
Yeah.
That his board, which, one of the things Scott Galloway talks about, he's been on a lot of boards and he's sort of a ethical voice on boards, is the corruption of so many of these boards. Like Tesla's a perfect example, because Musk has made everyone on that board immensely wealthy. So of course they're going to.
I mean, it helps if there's a villain. Frankly, I mean, if there's a face of a villain in these things. I mean, there used to be something called the climate crisis. That used to be a real issue. The warming of the planet. The growing intensity of and frequency of storms, which everyone can feel, and floods and hurricanes and tornadoes and wildfires and all of that. It's still happening. The consequences are still grave, but you have a regime that has at this point pretty much eliminated almost all of the regulations on fossil fuels to continue going in forever and ever in their plan. I mention it because if I would post something on social media about the issue of the climate crisis, it would get fairly low engagement. But when I talked about specific, Exxon or Mobil and specific actions that were taken, where in some sense there was a target of a villain, there was sort of the embodiment of evil in the specific case, the engagement was always much higher. And it strikes me that with this also you need the kind of clarity of a villain.
So let's play this out. I mean, now we have, should it be Jeff Bezos? Who, seems to me to be having one of the more public midlife crisis, embarrassing, or should it be?
Did you want to talk about his wedding? Is that what you?
I mean, plus a guy who is a billionaire who can't afford shirts that aren't 2 sizes too small for him.
Yeah,
so he can show off his steroided up body.
All those guys now seem to be, needing to show off their pumped up muscles.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, it's the same with this guy Peter Attia. I don't know if you followed him, but he's a doctor who, of course, Barry Weiss snatched up to be a medical expert. As it turns out, is all over the Epstein files, including while his infant son, is in an ICU unit fighting for his life. This guy is badgering Epstein about attending a party of his. So, probably Barry Weiss will keep him anyway. But Tim Cook at Apple. Yeah. I mean, as a friend of mine, and you have to be into Southern football and things to appreciate the sort of texture of this joke, says, well, what do you expect from a guy who went to Auburn? But still, why would Tim Cook? I mean, Apple has more cash on hand than the national budget of Iowa.
Yeah. And he shows up at every time, Donald Trump snaps his fingers, he came with that sort of fake trophy for him, the tribute for the king. I mean, I get that there is, a very wide network and a meaningful international chain that Tim Cook is trying to manage, and he worries about, obviously, like all these guys, he does worry about the bottom line. But I think Apple's a really interesting example. If you talk about a boycott or maybe a national economic strike, it's asking people to be uncomfortable. It's asking people to give up things that are part of their everyday life. I have an iPhone. Do I want to, for the next week not use it? I mean, that would be catastrophic. It would be hard to cut me off from that oxygen supply. Yeah. People are connected to these things. So I think there needs to be that kind of, clarity of goals. We're going to do this for X number of days to demonstrate what the power of the majority actually looks like and what the consequences can be if you continue to ignore what we're saying and what we need.
Yeah, it is the broadness of the targets, and that makes me, I kind of bump up with how would this work. I mean, if you look at other economic boycotts in the civil rights movement, you could do it in Montgomery, you could do it in very specific locations. In the Jimmy Kimmel thing, there was there's one network. Got it. We can do this.
Yeah. And people felt a personal connection with Jimmy Kimmel. When the news sort of came out that Stephen Colbert was going to lose his show, there was a really strong reaction because people feel a connection that's meaningful. So
should we go after Netflix because they paid this $40 million bribe to Melania? I mean, the level of disappointment and complicity is so broad.
Yeah.
And there was a thing that used to be said. There's even a word for it, phrase for it, coined by the person, name for the person who coined it. That the degree to which you talk about World War II reduces the seriousness of the conversation because there'll never be anything like World War II.
Yeah.
But I don't buy that now, and I think that the analogies with Germany in the 30s are so apt. Not that we're going to have a third World War, not that we're going to have 100 million people dead, not that we're going to have a Holocaust, but I don't think that's how analogies work.
Yeah.
I think that they don't have to have the same consequence. But when you look at the industrialists in Germany, who none of these people would have had Adolf Hitler, in their house.
Yeah. They saw economic opportunity. They were not only funding the enterprise, they were sharing, Zyklon B gas to the concentration camps that they had created. They saw economic opportunity, and they pursued it.
They convinced themselves the greater evil was trade unions and Bolshevism.
Yeah.
And the working class was becoming very.
I wonder, and I'm just thinking about this now. I wonder whether, in some ways, the rationale that was used for sustaining apartheid might be relevant here, because you would hear from a lot of people. I'm sure there were many in your world that said if you end apartheid, and you let the blacks take over, the country will collapse. Right. The ability of the majority to run their country is an impossibility. And so, you may think that, you may feel, you may know that that the system of apartheid is wrong, it's evil, it shouldn't happen, but it has to be sustained for the economic well-being of the country. That can be said about apartheid. It can be said about the Civil War period and the Confederacy sort of justifying slavery. We can kind of go through history of times when people in power, and specifically economic interests, saw it in the interests of themselves to sustain it, but also they then rationalized it in terms of the necessity for the country. And I think we have to break this mindset.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah.
And in some ways, I think it comes back to, this question about the Epstein files. Do you not unredact? Do you not call, the rapist? Do you not, name the reality of this, as horrible as it may be, as profound as the consequences could be for the country, as a necessary step to get over the destruction that it has caused? And will continue to bleed, continue to cause.
One of the more telling comparisons, I think, contrast, is how are the Epstein files affecting leaders in other countries? Let's just talk about England. It brought down the royal family. It takes a lot to get kicked out of the royal family. Yeah. They've had some really, unfortunate characters.
But Keir Starmer, right? The prime minister, what was his connection? It was like the ambassador to the United States, who is referenced in the files, and
much more. And the guy who was Starmer's political guru, chief of staff, ran his campaign. By all accounts, a brilliant guy. I have British friends that know him and think the guy's just, a political genius. And that guy who was appointed by Starmer to be British ambassador was his mentor. And so not only did the ambassador have to resign, but when it came out additional information about him, the chief of staff resigned. And what he said actually was just spot on. He didn't try to say, well, look, I didn't really do anything, but he said, look, total responsibility here. We have to set a better example.
Public responsibility.
Yeah.
And a sense of shame, and look, I was, I'm never one to sort of say, the shame and stigma and all that, we need to go back to the most extreme versions of it.
I'm very nostalgic about shame. I miss it. You know,
Well, there are extremes at both ends of the spectrum, and we're living through the consequences of utter and total shamelessness,
yes, I think
and
there's a
it's a horror, because it's not only the guy who's got his hands on the levers of power in the White House. It's also this whole regime, all the people surrounding him who have picked up on his example.
yeah, I think that there is a discernible and identifiable and understandable difference between a scarlet A for adultery and electing a pedophile for president.
Right.
Somewhere in
Right.
there is a ground where we could agree.
So let's get back to this. How does it play out? I mean,
Mhm.
in so many realms, how much, where do we get through the next 3 years where somehow this gets buried, or does it just continue to snowball and snowball in your view?
Look, I think this is really up to what happens inside the Democratic Party.
Hmm.
And, we talk about the need for a third party in America. In many ways, we already have a third party, and they're independents.
Hmm.
And, when you look at these polls, what really strikes me is the degree to which independents have collapsed on Republicans and on Trump. And it's only going to get worse. So if back in the day when I was doing campaigns, if I was doing campaigns now, I would take out the Republicans and just throw them. I just think it confuses you when you look at the sample, because there's absolutely nothing that 90% of them are ever going to change.
Yeah.
So, and so when you look at that, because they're distorting these numbers. So,
Interesting. Yeah. So just treat it as a cult that can't be
because
motivated.
why talk to these people? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like you're not going to do it. Frankly, to be honest, and this is sort of embarrassing, but it's true. There was a reality in polling in Republican campaigns that you would see very often, Republican incumbents, particularly, who were well known, getting, in a real solid poll, getting 19-21% of African American vote.
Mm-hmm.
And it would never happen on election day.
Mm-hmm.
It would always get like 7 to 10. I
Yeah.
mean, 10 was like celebratory.
So where did that
So I
19
used
to
to say to
20 come
campaign,
from?
I would just say, look, take this out. I mean, it's not, you can feel good now. You can think, but we're not. This is bullshit. We're going to get 8%.
Yeah.
So figure it in and plan to win with that 8%. Don't have a plan that's counting on that. Well, we're really going to do better. We're going to make history here and get 16%.
Well, not to mention that in this case, look, there's no question that Trump in 2024 benefited greatly from remarkably a large Latino vote. Well, that's gone.
Yeah, that's absolutely gone. And that idea that the 24 election was a realignment election, to any of those who worked in the Republican Party, it was always such bullshit.
Yeah.
Because, okay, he got up to 42% of Hispanics. We got there in Bush world in 2004. But this is something Bush had really believed. I mean, it's the way he had governed. Right.
Yeah.
And in Texas, there is a different culture. There is that Tex-Mex culture. I mean, even Ted Cruz does better with Hispanic. So many families that have, a Hispanic father-in-law.
Yeah.
You have a culture. We call it Tex-Mex. So Bush got 42%, I think we got. And then it dropped to like 31% for McCain. And the same for Romney. And it wasn't like McCain was up there saying, we're going to, deport all these people. And still it came down. And so there was this internal tension of a MAGA base that wanted what they have now. An army with a larger funding than the Marines, of a bunch of, fat guys playing Delta Force, chasing gardeners through Brentwood and going into schools.
Yeah.
Or you were going to have Hispanics who were disproportionately, I mean, as my old campaign colleague, Brett Kavanaugh, says, it's fine to have Kavanaugh stops to go and profile. Which I wrote a piece about this, which I hope Brett read. Odds are he didn't, but I think he probably did, because it would have been sent to him by a lot of people he knows. It says, the reason, Brett, by the way, that you're Supreme Court justice is because George Bush. Bush would not have been president without Hispanic voters. So think about that. You're the guy that Kavanaugh stopped. You wouldn't be there without Hispanics. And a lot of these people, you're saying it's okay to stop them and assume that they're guilty because, they're brown, and
Yeah.
to go after their family members. Like, how does that feel at night, Brett? Does that feel like really good? I mean, it's anyway.
But
So
again,
so look, I think if you held a gun to my head and said, what is the most, I mean, politics is all about probability. What is the most likely scenario?
yeah,
I would say it is that Democrats are going to win in large numbers in the midterms. And they're going to win in large enough numbers that you're not going to be able to steal it.
yeah,
And, there's not voter fraud in America. I worked in
no,
elections my entire adult life.
no.
I saw more people dying of elephantitis in America than I saw voter fraud.
Yeah, I think the number of undocumented immigrants voting in the last election was like 9.
I mean, so just think about that. You're going to wake up in the morning and you go, dude, I'm going to commit a felony and vote. The problem we have, we can't get people to vote when it's legal. Half the country won't vote. So we're going to say,
Yeah.
all right, listen, man.
So,
I'll say
I mean, look, I mean,
I'm going to go vote.
you saw, victories for Democrats in Louisiana, victories for Democrats in, in a very red district in Texas. We've seen, obviously the Virginia and New Jersey, governors' races. I mean, I think, and I said it, I've said it, I've been saying it for months. I mean, the rising rage, the rising outrage, I worried that it might, dissipate between now and November. That was maybe a month ago. I don't worry about it anymore. I think people are furious. I think that the ability to sustain it in terms of public protest, whether it's a boycott or otherwise, I think there's a limit on how much people can handle. I think there's a real exhaustion factor that's part of the playbook of the regime, which is to, this kind of constant onslaught of new horrors, new violations, new things that just, blow your mind and make you crazy, that they're doing it on a daily basis, that the sheer variety of craziness is something that overwhelms people. And so,
They count on that. You're exactly right.
100%. And I think, that's hard to sustain the outrage in a very direct way, day after day after day. Although I try to do my part, and I know that you do, and people are very connected, try to do it. But I think it all builds toward November. And look at John Ossoff, the senator in Georgia, has been saying the last days, the only way you really fight this is with an overwhelming victory, which is to say an overwhelming defeat. And without an overwhelming defeat, it gives Trump the basis to say that the numbers are not, believable, to seize ballots, to do all those things. But if it's overwhelming, that's harder to do, as you're suggesting.
Yeah, and look, so I think the odds are, in a probability sense, if you had to bet, the Democrats will win big in the midterms.
Yeah,
they probably will win the next presidential election. I think the key.
It's a lifetime from now, but yeah.
Question for about the future is going to be: are Democrats going to accept the responsibility and role that they have to go about prosecuting the criminality of the Trump administration?
Yeah.
And I think, excuse me, I think all the positive signs are the Democrats and independents are drawn to passion.
Yeah.
When you saw that speech by John Ossoff, and if we do that, I mean, Kristi Noem should be tried and if found guilty, imprisoned.
Yeah, 100%.
The same with Stephen Miller.
How about Pam Bondi? Can we?
Yeah, Pam Bondi probably. And who I last saw on a campaign bus, supposed to speak at a rally, and she was so drunk that she never got off the bus. But that's your attorney general. But
nothing but the best people is he going to put in.
But that is going to be the question. I think you could have made a case, and I probably, if I went back and read myself a list, I probably made it over and over, that what really needed to happen after Trump was we needed to have a return to normalcy, elect a normal president,
Yeah.
and that the country would be so relieved.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh God, I don't have to have this nail in my head. I can actually have it.
Well, I think plenty of people felt that when Joe Biden was
But we tried that with Joe
could
Biden.
actually wake up in the morning and not
And-
have
and-
to check out what new horror.
But I would have thought that would have been enough to reward that party such
Yeah.
that there wouldn't be a return. Now, there were extraneous forces. I think Biden made a terrible decision to run for re-election. He should have gotten out the day after the midterms. The confluence of events.
Yeah.
But, of all these numbers, just as somebody sitting in campaign headquarters, the numbers that I think are really driving this more than anything else is that question: do you think the country's going in the right direction or the wrong direction?
Yeah.
And, on election day in 24, 27% of the people thought it was going in the right direction. That is just an insanely difficult environment for an incumbent party to win.
Well, and I think, look, I've been looking, and I'm always sort of asking the question, what will be the event? What will be the catalytic moment that finally convinces people to say enough is enough? And I don't know that I can give you a single answer, but I think in some ways in this last period, the closest to that has been the murder of Nicole Good and Alex Preddy. That people saying, having American citizens murdered on the streets of Minneapolis who were engaging in legitimate and legal, free speech, public protest, is absolutely abhorrent. And having essentially death squads roaming the country to serve what? It's surely not just to get rid of the worst of the worst. And I think that's something that people are sickened by. I think they're sickened by the Epstein stuff, but again, it's hard to be singular, and I hope that keeps building. But if you come to November, I have to hope, and I don't think it's exactly a litmus test, but I think we have to hope that the decision is you elect fighters, not folders. You elect people who say accountability matters. We're going to hold these people accountable because it's the only way to move forward, to begin a process of both tamping down Trump's power and repairing the country.
I wrote a piece about the absurdity of these ICE agents thinking they can hide their identity behind masks. I mean, look, I asked our friends at ChatGPT, like, how many government databases are ICE agents appearing in? And it was a long goddamn
list. Lot.
I mean, and so, if you look at entire societies that were built on keeping the secret police secret, like East Germany, how did that work out? Well, today you can go online and you can find Stasi files, which literally, if they lined up the file cabinets containing the Stasi files, they say it stretched for 79 miles. That's how much records there were. The Nazis thought they could do it and started doing it, pretty early, spring of 45. Didn't work, guys. I mean, some people, yes, but not everybody.
It is fascinating, the numbers of people who were, utterly committed to removing masks during COVID. I know are the same people now say the masks are absolutely necessary.
These records are going to show not just who was in ICE, it's going to show where they were day to day because they have expense accounts. It's going to show what their training was. It's going to show where they spent the night. It's going to show by mileage. It's going to show how many cans of pepper spray they were issued. I mean, this is the government. There are going to be incredibly detailed files of these people, and they're all going to become known.
Yeah, and let's acknowledge sort of the role. I know that Illinois is doing it because Governor Pritzker has made a point of saying that they're, beginning to build. I'm forgetting there was some. It wasn't sort of the reconciliation file, but it was, a collective effort to document what's happening.
Yes.
To gather the evidence now in preparation for when these people can be held accountable. And I don't believe in acting on the basis of vengeance. I believe in acting on the basis of justice. And if we're going to get through this, that accountability is number one. It's
going to be on a state level. Yeah. And that's why the role of these attorney generals and these local prosecutors are so important. Because, there's not a state in the country where it's illegal to shoot a woman 3 times in the face.
Yeah.
Or to human traffic, or to kidnap, or to break into somebody's home with assault rifles.
Well, or to shove a protester to the ground and then shoot him 10
times in the
times,
back.
while your fellow thug is literally applauding.
Yeah, I saw an interview with a woman who's one of the prosecutors in Minneapolis, and she had been in Washington for a meeting of other prosecutors in other states, sort of discussing what their options were. And I think the moment is going to come, and I don't think it's far ahead, where when local law enforcement sees ICE agents breaking the windows of cars, chasing people, they're going to arrest their ass. And they're going to put them in jail. They're going to put them in the back of paddy wagons, and they're going to take them away.
Yeah.
And let there be test cases. And let me tell you, I mean, most of these ICE agents, they're going to end up being in sort of a state of perpetual second-class citizenship. Because, if you're a security agency and you hire a former ICE agent and something happens and you get sued, you will have known that you had brought in willingly someone with reason to believe you had previous liability.
Yeah.
And that, if you ask any trial lawyer, that is like an express train to monumental punitive damages. And, they're talking about in California that no ICE agents will be eligible for any public jobs.
Yeah.
You can't get hired as a bus driver. You can't get hired as a cop. You can't get hired as a teacher. And
does Donald Trump pardon? I don't know what the number is.
Everyone.
40,000 ICE agents.
Everyone.
And does that hold?
No, because they're state crimes.
Yeah.
We don't execute many people. There is a federal statute against murder that has a death penalty, and we could look it up, but this occurs not very often, as opposed to Texas, where they still execute people a lot.
Yeah.
And it'll be these state laws that'll go after it. Now, part of the tragedy is you can't imagine a Republican attorney general doing this. And it's such a dereliction of duty, because your job is to protect your citizens.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, like I talked about, sort of Illinois, sort of beginning to gather the evidence. I know some other states have, are sort of following that model. A lot of surely the Democratic states attorneys generals are listening to each other, are talking to each other, looking for sort of best practices to respond to this. So, I'm hopeful that there is a growing population of states and leaders in those states who are preparing themselves for being able to hold these people accountable. That's got to be one of the reasons to be optimistic that there's a way through this.
Yeah. Look,
can I offer one more reason for optimism?
Yes. That's how we should go out. Absolutely.
Might be a good spot. Donald Trump, who called Mark Kelly and the other Democratic lawmakers, have committing, their terrorist, or that they committed seditious behavior, which is punishable by death, because they actually describe what the Constitution says, that soldiers should not follow illegal orders. But the thing is, they just yesterday, the grand jury, and the euphemism is always that you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. Well, they couldn't get a grand jury to indict these 6 Democratic lawmakers for their expressing their First Amendment freedom, and that's a beautiful thing. Absolutely.
So look, we'll wind it up there, but everybody out there. Every day we see collapse of our traditional media. I mean, it is heartbreaking what's happened at the Washington Post. For those of us who grew up, and so many people did, if nothing else, because of Watergate. But we're not going to have anybody else out there to save ourselves. So when you look at what Stephen's doing with America, his Substack, please subscribe, please support it, please pay to support it.
Thank you.
But it's fantastic. I read it. It's one of the few things I read, and I don't know what Stephen's going to say about this. I don't know. It's interesting, and I think that's the real mark, because most of us have about 3 things to say, and we say them over and over again. But Stephen really has this Very interesting perspective, and really should follow it and support Lincoln Square.
Yeah, please do.
You know, which is growing. It's doing tremendously well, which is very rewarding to people running Lincoln Square, of which I have absolutely nothing to do with. Are doing
the discourse, the dialogue is what matters. You know,
yes.
Engaging is what matters. You know, whether it's Lincoln Square, whether it's with America, and you know, as much as I value people reading, and I value the community that's emerged, where you know Americans have an opportunity, and by the way, people from all over the world have the opportunity to be a part of a community. And I know that's true with Lincoln Square too,
Yeah.
where they're able to talk to each other, share ideas, you know, test out their ideas, and stay involved, because that's the critical thing, because we've got a regime that's absolutely devoted to getting the public to disengage, to feel despair, to feel they can't do anything. And you know, this is exactly what we have to fight against. And
to be reminded that there's more of us than there are of them.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Stuart.
Subscribe
Always
to
a pleasure.
America, and look forward to talking again soon.